Hello, girls.
Hello, Master. Why are you disturbing us from our sleep?
Well, I can't sleep. It's 1 o'clock at night. So why should you be allowed to?
Oh, well, we weren't actually asleep. We were planning a dirty trick on you, Master.
Well, it's a good job I've interrupted you. Look, how about we have a bit of true crime?
Oh, you know we like that, Master.
What do you think, Sparehead?
Oh, yes, Master. Tell us some true crime, preferably a local one to ours that scares us.
Yeah, all right then. Well, this one I know a bit about. It's been done before, but as per normal, I'm not going to resist the chance to bash the police, so let's go for it.
Master, you always like to bash the police.
I do, but again, in this case, they made some terrible mistakes. So, the Jo Yeates case, anyway. A 25-year-old landscape architect from Hampshire. Beautiful young woman, intelligent woman, living with her boyfriend, Greg Reardon, in Canning Road. It's a very posh flats up in Clifton. Clifton's the posh part of Bristol.
Oh, we couldn't afford a house there, could we, Master?
No, we certainly couldn't. So, yeah, nice posh part of Bristol. Lots of restaurants around there, not far from the suspension bridge. And there's this big shared house, has lots of flats built within it. I think, again, it's sort of Victorian construction, as all these buildings up in Clifton are. 17th of December, it's getting towards Christmas. Jo and her boyfriend work for landscape gardening, landscape architecture kind of company. Anyway, she finishes work, probably about 5 o'clock, something like that. And she goes out for drinks with her mates, goes up Park Street to a bar halfway up Park Street. It's no longer there, it's shut down now. Has some drinks, and then saunters back up the road. Later on, I don't know how late she stayed, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. It's dark, though, because we're in December, don't forget. This is Friday, 17th of December, 2010, if I didn't say it already. So she wanders up the road, she goes into Tesco Extra, or Tesco Express, rather. I think she buys some cider in there. She goes into a little Waitrose that's still there a little bit further up the road, buys herself a rather disgusting vegetarian pizza, not the sort of thing I would eat.
We wouldn't like that one either, Master. Was it like mascarpone and yeah?
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, whatever. And she carries on walking up the road. It's probably a 15-20 minute walk all the way to Canning Road, but then again, she's a lot younger and fitter than I am now, so maybe it was quicker than that. It's not quite snowing yet, but it's the sky is leaden. It will be snowing. And anyway, gets back to her flat, and that's that. Takes off her coat, takes off her boots, presumably puts her pizza in the oven, certainly opens up a can of cider and drinks some of it, and then that's that. We go forward to the Sunday. I should have mentioned the partner, Greg, has been away. He left much earlier on in the day to visit relatives up country, so he's out of the picture. He is getting increasingly concerned, though, because Jo, would normally text him. They'd be texting back and forth or WhatsApping, whatever they did in 2010. Not happening. Not getting replies from Jo Saturday night. He is, Friday night, all day Saturday, no replies. And then come Sunday, he is getting worried. So Sunday, he drives back, because he's got to go to work on the Monday. It's quite a long drive back from the north. So he drives back. He gets home. I don't know if it was the morning. I believe it was still the morning on Sunday, but I could be wrong there. It might be early afternoon. Now it is snowy. The snow came down Friday night, and it stopped snowing now, but there's a good, 20 centimetres or so of snow everywhere. He gets back, goes in the house. Where's Jo? He's not too concerned. He's only a young lad. She's a young girl. Young woman, he's not that worried. And of course, he saunters in, goes into the kitchen of his nice little posh sort of professionals flat that they have there. Probably with extortionate rents. Probably, yeah, but anyway, let's not digress into that. Wanders into the kitchen. Of course, he sees a half-open bottle of cider. What does he do? What would anyone do?
We would certainly drink that, Master. Oh, I could just use a bottle now.
I don't have any. He drinks the bottle of cider, and this will become a problem because he's just drunk the evidence. Anyway, he thinks it's peculiar because, Jo's not there, doesn't know where she is. He rings her phone And now he gets really worried because he hears the ringing from Jo's coat pocket, and her coat is in the flat. And he goes and he finds her phone, and he sees all the missed calls on it and everything, sees it's untouched. The coat is there. He now gets really worried. He looks around, her boots are there. Why would that worry him?
Well, because it's freezing cold outside. Jo would not be outside for very long without a coat or boots, or she would die of exposure.
Yeah. So he phones Jo's parents and explains the situation, and they all come down and they phone the police and everything else. The police immediately, to be fair, they escalate it. They recognise this is a very worrying disappearance on that Sunday, and they start canvassing around. They start knocking on all the doors, as they do, starting off with all the other flats in this large building, because this big Victorian building, as I said, was partitioned into quite a number of flats. And one of them is Jo's next-door neighbour, Vincent Tabak, who, of course, will be the villain of the story, or one of the several villains, because he would prove to be the murderer, of course. And they talk to him and his girlfriend, and he apparently just kind of skulks in the background. His girlfriend does the talking, and just says, no, I'm not seeing anything, and kind of leaves it at that. He's a Dutch expert on the flow of people through buildings. You know, he has a role in designing stadia and things like this, because he understands people flow and getting them in, getting them out, avoiding crushes, all that. He works for Bureau Happold, which is just on the outskirts of Bath. By this point, you know, everyone's getting worried. So the next day or two, it gets featured on the media because Jo's vanished. No idea where she is, but the suspicion is obviously foul play, because no one's going to go outside without their boots and their coat and leave their phone there. And also the fact that the cider was there indicates she'd obviously got home that Friday night, started drinking it, and then vanished in the middle of it. But one of the problems was there was no obvious signs of foul play.
Sorry, say that again?
Okay, I said that wrong. Foul play, yeah, I mean, obviously it was suspicious, but there was no sign of a fight. There wasn't blood to be found. It wasn't like there was furniture bashed around. There was no evidence of the door being kicked in or anything like this. No damage to the door, really. So, the first thing the police conclude, what do you think they concluded?
I would suspect the attacker was known to Jo because she obviously opened the door to them. And she probably wouldn't have done had she not known them.
Yeah, it was a dark, snowy night. She's a young woman there by herself, and I believe that was her first weekend in Bristol, in the new flat, alone without her partner. So apparently she was concerned about that. And so she wouldn't have opened the door to a random stranger. And the door hadn't been broken, there were no windows that had been tampered with or anything. So it was obvious that she'd been tricked somehow into opening the door. And if I remember, we'll speculate on how that was done later. Anyway, we're all looking, and I can remember at this time we're all pretty worried. Living in Bristol, you know, at the time, had very much the same age as Jo, had a wife very much the same age as Jo. I can remember buying, you know, a can of deep heat to put on the doors, put next to the door, you know, to use it almost like a bit of pepper spray. If anyone came to the door when I was at work or whatever, and my wife answered it. You know, there's things like we were worried, and there are reasons to be worried. We'd had other disappearances, so. Up there, in 1974, just down the road is Bristol Zoo. Maybe 5 minutes, no, it's probably 10 minutes walk is Bristol Zoo from Canning Road, that their flat. There was a girl called Glenys Carruthers in 1974, and she'd been at a party in Canning Road. And of course, at the time, there was much speculation, because apparently there were some people who'd been at that party in 74 that were also still around there now and were known to Jo, and it was thinking, you know, is there someone at work here that, you know, an elderly serial killer perhaps, that because this girl, Glenys Carruthers, I didn't say it already, on the road just outside Bristol Zoo, she was strangled to death, and to this day they've not caught the killer. It seems that the killer was probably disturbed during that attack. The only evidence, really, that they've retained is a string of beads that Glenys was wearing round her neck, but it would appear they might have been washed. I'm not aware they've ever got DNA off them, so, you know, there's one killer there, still on the loose, most likely, unless he's dead by now. And also, we had Melanie Hall in Bath in 1996, who disappeared from Cadillac's nightclub and wasn't heard from again until 2001 when her bones turned up next to the Thornbury junction of the M5. So, we've had some unsolved murders and quite a few unsolved disappearances in Bristol, which may or may not be murders. And in fact, it's quite alarming when you look at how many disappearances there are versus how many are actually publicised in the media, particularly when it's men don't get a mention. It's only those few that are escalated because there are obvious suspicious circumstances and avenues of investigation. Quite often, we find that some people disappear and everyone's like, yeah, they've disappeared before, and it doesn't get featured in the media. But I'm digressing. But at the time, there was worry. In fact, at the time, well, actually, let's just move on now. So moving forward, 25th of, I should have said as well, no one was initially arrested. Greg was ruled out. It could be seen that he was away with his family at the time they suspect that the disappearance occurred. So he was treated as a suspect. Obviously, they take his phone, take his computer, check it over. They do the due diligence, and he was eliminated. Vincent and his girlfriend are now on holiday. And I didn't mention before, he's from Holland. So he's back in Amsterdam, I believe, at this point. He's certainly over in Holland. Might have been Rotterdam. Something ending in dam. He's in Holland with family members. Okay, so fast forward to December 25th December, Christmas Day 2010, and there's some dog walkers walking in Thailand. I believe the road's Beggarbush Lane. Either way, it's not far away. If you cross over, when you're there in Clifton, in Canning Road, there's the Bristol Suspension Bridge, built by Brunel. Again, wonderful Victorian construction, quite famous. If you walk across that, and then you carry on walking, it's probably 15 minutes walk, from Canning Road, 20 minutes walk, and then you're over the suspension bridge, and you just walk up a little hill called, well, actually you don't need to walk up, because when you're on suspension bridge, you're at the top of the hill, but you're at the top of a hill called Ram Hill. You've got Lee Woods to your right, and then you've got a few little roads leading off to the left, and this is all the major A road that leads to the motorway. But yeah, not far along is these little side roads, and it was down one of these next to a brick wall where there's a quarry over the other side, where unfortunately the dog walkers found Jo's body. Pretty much covered in snow. It was quite a fortunate find because the snow hasn't melted yet. So 25th of December, the body is found and it's taken back, and they have to defrost it. As they do before they can do the post-mortem. So it took a little bit of time because, unfortunately, her body was frozen. And this led at the time to much speculation about about how her body got to be there. Had she just gone out for a walk without her coat and shoes? Not likely, and then frozen to death. That was one ridiculous theory put forward at the time. But most likely, she'd been transported in a vehicle, of course. And the most direct way is driving straight from Canning Road across the suspension bridge. You can be there in 5-10 minutes to where the body was found. So, immediately, everyone began speculating that that everyone was looking at the CCTV, or the police were looking at the CCTV from the suspension bridge. There's a lot of CCTV there. For one reason, unfortunately, it's a popular spot where people take their own lives. And so there are many cameras there that are monitored in an effort to prevent that happening. But it turned out the CCTV apparently wasn't particularly good quality. And as we'll go on to see, the killer didn't in fact use the suspension bridge anyway. He drove down into the centre of Bristol and went around. Whether he was consciously avoiding the bridge because he knew there were cameras, or whether or not, I don't think he thought about that myself. Anyway, so the police are looking into it, and the question is, Jo obviously got home, and the police knew this. There had been screams emanating from the apartment at around 9 o'clock on that Friday night. That's one thing that the police did know. So they speculated that the attack must have been round about then, 9 o'clock Friday night. Obviously, the post-mortem was challenging. In terms of post-mortem evidence...
Master, what does post-mortem mean?
It's when they look at the body after death to establish, was what was the cause of death and everything. And he was a forensic pathologist, one that's licensed by the Home Office to do sort of criminal investigations almost. So I believe it required 2 post-mortems because the first one they couldn't establish a cause of death.
Why was that, Master?
It would appear, they found on the second post-mortem, Jo had been strangled, and she did have injuries to her body. It seems she'd fought for her life. She'd fought like an absolute tiger. But, unfortunately, she'd been overmatched. She was only quite a small lady, not particularly tall, certainly very light, and she'd done all she could, but, it would have taken probably a gun to keep the attacker off that night. Not that I'm advocating that. So she had lots of injuries, including a broken nose. And at this point, we'd no longer have a forensic science service in the UK. We rely on private companies to do DNA testing. And so they took many, many swabs from her body, as they do. They can often identify where biological fluids are using a crime light, this kind of UV light that makes various biological things fluoresce. And so they can target their swab taking. They'd taken lots of swabs and they'd sent them off. But that would take a long time to come back. This is not immediate. It would take several weeks, partly because the killer had been careful. There was very little DNA on Jo's body. It wasn't like there was a big patch of one particular biological fluid that they could easily swab and get answers back ASAP. No, it would trace amounts, maybe from the odd skin cell, maybe from a little splash of saliva, or tiny little bits. There was no evidence that she'd been assaulted. And when I say assaulted, we know what I mean by that.
That's good, Master. That's very good. We're glad to hear that, Master.
Yeah, so that was something. What do the police do? Anyway, let's fast forward. So, there's no immediate culprit. DNA is not coming back for a while. So, what do? There's no sign of forced entry. So who's the obvious culprit and candidate?
Anybody with a key, Master.
And of course, who has the key?
The landlord, Master Jefferies. A weird schoolmaster.
Don't call him that. He was is a very charismatic and intelligent man. A man very, very much like myself, in love with his books. He was fairly reclusive, had massive library, and of course he lived in one of the flats. He owned the whole building and rented out the flats, but he lived in one on site. And of course he was the obvious candidate. Why do you think he was?
He had a key and he looked like a weirdo.
Basically, yeah, he looks like a weirdo. And look, I'll be honest, when I saw him on telly the first time, before he'd been arrested, I immediately said to my then wife, hey, he must be the killer. He looks like a weird... And I honestly I was patting myself on the back, because like a day or two later, having seen him do an interview on local news, and said, hey, he's got to be the killer. He just looks the part. He was arrested. I thought, hey, I got it right. And I even had a few theories about, why he'd done it and everything. But of course, I was totally wrong. He was a completely innocent man, and he'd basically been arrested for no reason whatsoever, other than he looked a bit like a weirdo. But should he have been arrested at all? And this is my question, because he was arrested on the 30th of December, and he was held for 2 days, which I don't know, but I presume he'd never been arrested before. I'm sure he was a very law-abiding man. It's a horrible experience, suddenly being arrested and being isolated from everybody, not allowed to talk to anyone other than your legal counsel. It must have been an extraordinary amount of pressure on him. And you think that they would have some evidence. And again, did they?
No, they arrested him because he's a weirdo.
Yeah, exactly. Should he have been arrested at all? Well, going back to who the other suspects were, that Friday night, well, let's just say, in terms of killers, right, you have to clear the ground under your feet. So before you start looking for random strangers, you eliminate those closest, and you work outwards in that way, eliminating everybody connected to the victim, and you work your way outwards. On that Friday night, when they know that she was attacked and abducted, Chris Jefferies was there. He was reading books in his apartment. But he was an elderly gentleman even then, and clearly a very non-violent chap, unless he had a hidden dark side no one knew about. But there was a very, very tall man called Vincent Tabak right next door.
Did he have an alibi, Master?
No, Vincent Tabak was next door that evening. His girlfriend was away late at the party, coming back very, very, very late, totally by himself, right next door, and he's a tall, tall man. He's the type of man that could overpower a smaller person and strangle them.
Why wasn't he arrested, Master?
Well, because he was a young, confident foreigner with a professional job, and he didn't look like a weirdo.
I've seen pictures of him and I don't like the look of him.
No, he does look thuggish in his mugshot, but I don't think he appeared that way at the time. But he was just as good a suspect. Absolutely just as good. I mean, he didn't have an alibi. He was there all evening. If they had used the same rules they applied to Chris Jefferies, they should have also hauled in Tabak. He was just there. Yes, he didn't have a key, but he was known to Jo. He could easily have knocked on a door and gained entry. And, but there's another reason why he should have already aroused suspicion. Do you know what it is, girls?
I've heard about this one. A female police officer flew off on the plane to Holland Dam and swabbed Master Tabak, and he behaved suspiciously.
Yeah, that's right. A young female detective had gone on a plane over to Holland during that holiday before, I believe, the body had been found. I'm not certain on the date that he was swabbed. But either way, when they tried to swab him, he was very reticent. He didn't want to. He was asking all sorts of questions. And the officer was just reassuring him, it's only routine and all this rah-de-rah. And of course now, he can't back out now. It's highly suspicious. So he did accept the swab. But the officer had phoned back to the incident room and had said, look, this Vincent Tabak, he looks a bit shifty and he did not want that DNA test. Surely, the moment someone obviously doesn't want a DNA test, if you're in the business of hauling in anybody who is a possible suspect just because they don't have an alibi, surely they should at that point have hauled in Tabak. However, I guess I can cut the police some slack because you know what Tabak also did?
He tried to lie to the police and say that Master Jefferies had taken his car out that night.
He did. He tried to misdirect the police, saying that, the landlord's car had been turned around and stuff like this. So he was trying to sow seeds of doubt about the landlord. But even so, look, they've got enough cells for all their average, people who've said something a bit rude on Twitter or people who've, pushed someone else in a bar and, surely, suspicion of murder, bring them both in, I would have done, or bring neither of them in, just wait for the evidence. But what they did was disgraceful, the way in which they hauled in Jefferies, and then suddenly all the newspapers come out calling him some kind of vile weirdo. It was disgusting. Incidentally, I at this time thought I might have had to have been some sort of witness because, ironically, or not ironically, rather darkly I suppose, I was actually driving back on that road from the motorway, the very one that the killer must have taken. And so we get to this point now. So they're starting to look into... they finally get a bit of DNA back. And just to include that, when we know that the road that the killer had taken, he would have come up from the centre, along that road toward the motorway, then turned off left and deposited the body. I was driving back that night because I'd finished work at 9 o'clock along the motorway somewhere, and I would have been driving back about 9:30. So it's entirely possible I might have driven past the ultimate killer, who I think we've all now revealed is Vincent Tabak. That was the road I came. I can remember the snow coming down that evening and thinking, I need to get home before the snow gets too deep. I remember that very well. Anyway, so let's fast forward a little bit now. Jefferies was released. There was no evidence. They took all his books, and incidentally, he was only taken off bail on the 4th of March 2011, even though by that point they'd had the killer in custody for a couple of months. And apparently they took all his books for some reason. Maybe the chief police officer wanted to enlarge his own library or something, I don't know. But they took all his books, and he didn't get them back for months either, which must have been very unpleasant for him. Go away, you. All right. So, 20th of January. Vincent Tabak is arrested. Why? Because finally they've managed to do enough replications of the DNA. They've managed to use the most advanced technologies at the time to finally isolate a DNA sample. And it's 1 in a billion match to Vincent Tabak. Okay.
I knew it was him right from the start, Master.
And so Vincent Tabak was hauled in. And then he confessed as well to a prison chaplain that he had done it as well. And now, taking it forward to court, this is the outrageous thing. Another villain of the story is the idiots on this jury.
Why'd you say that, Master?
Because the jury was a majority verdict. Because, of course, Vincent didn't admit he'd done it on purpose, even though, well, we won't go into that. He didn't admit he'd done it on purpose. But Jo had been attacked viciously, had many injuries on her body, as we said, broken nose stuff, and she had been strangled to death. Can you strangle to death someone by accident, girls?
I should think probably yes. Just a little tickle on the neck and they fall over, don't they, Master?
Yeah. You would know about this, Sparehead.
I know a little about this for not having a neck. No, you have to push and push and push and strangle for 5 minutes to kill somebody. I know this because I don't have a neck, therefore I have studied necks, for I would like to come by one day.
Yeah, so you don't strangle someone immediately. There's some nonsense doctrine that you can just give someone a little pinch on the neck, on the carotid, and they drop down dead. Never been proven, in fact. Absolute nonsense. Vincent Tabak tried to claim, oh, she screamed, so naturally I stuck my hand around her neck, and she died. And yet 2 people bought it on the jury. There's a 10-2 verdict. Outrageous. What idiots. If I'd have been in there, I'd have said, well, I know from MMA that it's quite normal to choke people unconscious. It's a common thing in MMA. And then the referee jumps in, you let go, and they immediately revive. You can't kill someone brain dead by strangling them until they pass out. You need to keep strangling until they're dead, until their brain tissue begins to die. It takes several minutes. Anyone who knows anything about this kind of thing knows that killers struggle with strangulation. Their first time at it, usually they, if you know the BTK killer, Dennis Rader of Wichita, Kansas, he kept having this problem when he tried to kill the whole family, the Otero family, his first victims. They kept reviving. He moves from the mum to the dad to the child to the younger child. And then he strangles one, thinks they're dead, starts strangling another, and the next one pops, they pop back up again. They come to again, and he has to go and re-strangle them. He's having to go around the room re-strangling them and then putting various bags over there. Look, it's pretty horrible. But that's the reality. You have to squeeze until someone passes out, then continue squeezing, and it's extremely tiring on your hands. And it's very likely that he might have used one of Jo's socks to do this. Why do I say that?
One of her large socks was missing, Master.
Yeah, one of Jo's socks was missing, and it's never been discovered. My theory... Well, actually, we'll get to the sock a little bit later. We'll just finish bashing the jury. So, of course, the moment after the trial, and he's sent down for 20 years, of course, it emerges, what had he been doing in his flat that evening, girls?
He had been making nice little fairy cakes for his partner when she comes home, and maybe decorating a Christmas tree.
He might have done that, but one thing he was doing on his laptop, he was looking at violent pornography.
Oh, pornography. We don't like that, Master.
Yes, from the Greek, the writings of prostitutes, I believe. Pornography. He'd been looking at violent pornography, and at least one of the videos depicted the strangulation of women, or a woman. Now, if they're consenting to that, I guess that's up to them. But he was watching that, and I believe it was illegal, what he was watching. However, does that not give us a clue as to why he went next door and attacked Jo? I think it does. But they weren't allowed to present that to the jury. It was thought it might be prejudicial, which I can see where they're coming from on that one. And even Jo's parents said, yeah, look, there's no point in presenting that evidence. And then later, Tabak uses it as a basis for an appeal. And it has to be a retrial. Yeah, it's better to be on the safe side. At least they got their verdict. So, that's what he was doing. And so let's just quickly summarise what he had done. So, he'd been there, okay. Jo had come back, I don't know, maybe 7, half 7, 8. I forget the time. I think it was fairly late. I think it was more like 8. Vincent's next door, watching the violent pornography. He wants to attack Jo. He's had his eye on her for a while. He may be a serial killer already. it was said he's certainly a serial killer in the making. How does he get Jo to open the door? They were not good friends, and Jo was nervous. What's his thought was that he picked up her cat, and because the cat would wander around and so on, it's thought maybe he grabbed her cat, went to the door and said, "Oh, should your cat be out in the snow? It might be too cold for your cat." I think cats are all right in the snow. I don't particularly like them anyway.
You like cats, master, and so does the mistress.
Whatever. It's thought he used the cat to trick his way in, because he mentioned the cat as part of his defence, trying to claim that Jo had somehow invited him in and said, "Oh, please kiss me, please strangle me." It was a ridiculous and insulting defence to Jo and her family. But it's thought he used the cat to trick his way in and then attacked her. And it's thought that maybe, because one of the socks was missing, that could have been the murder weapon. And we might as well talk about that now. Why did the sock go missing? My thoughts is that it was used probably to strangle Jo. Because I think if he'd have been pressing really hard on her neck with his hands, it would have been immediately obvious death by strangulation. Like I said, it needed 2 post-mortems to identify it. So it seems Jo was strangled fairly slowly and carefully for, a horrible thing to say.
That's a really horrible thing to say, master.
It would appear. I don't know if a hyoid bone was broken or not. The bone that your tongue is mounted on, a little floating bone in your throat. Very often in strangulation that is broken along with other cartilages around it and so on. I think there was very little damage to these areas of the throat, and so it could well be that it was via ligature, via this big, long, furry sock that she had. Why would he discard it? Well, I reckon he had the presence of mind to know his hands have been all over this thing, his sweat's going to be all over it, his skin cells are going to be all over it. I reckon that is why he pocketed that and discarded it somewhere. So after he'd done that, he put Jo's body in his bicycle bag, because there were no scuff marks on her body, so we know she wasn't dragged. Put her body into his bicycle bag. He's thinking here. He's not panicking. Puts her in the boot of his car. Now he thinks, I need an alibi here. This is a problem. He drives down to our local Bedminster Asda. Why does he do that?
You just said, master, to make an alibi.
Yeah, and he makes sure to wander in and out where the cameras are. He knows where the cameras are. He's not daft. He specialises in the flow of people. He knows there are cameras there. And just to make certain, he goes in and out twice. All the time, Jo's there in the boot of his car. So then he drives up to avoiding the suspension bridge. So he drives up from the Bedminster Asda around, presumably, which way? Yeah. So he drives up, avoiding. It would appear he avoided all the if there were automatic number plate recognition cameras. I don't believe. I've never heard evidence he was captured by any. So it seems the route he took even avoided cameras, other than when he wanted to be filmed. To say I couldn't have done it, I was in Asda. So he goes up the hill, deposits the body. Now here is where we were very, very, very lucky. Otherwise, he would still be on the loose. And who knows, maybe poor innocent Mr. Jefferies would have gone down for it. What did he do?
He tried to shove her body off the wall, and for some reason he couldn't, even though he's twice as big as her.
Yeah, this is the thing. He could have got her body over that wall into the quarry the other side, and it's unlikely it would ever have been found, at least maybe not for many years. And so it was entirely the DNA evidence on that body that got him caught. If he'd have shoved the body over the wall, he'd have got away with it. But luckily, it appears, a couple of cars came round the corner, the headlights startled him, and so he left it. He tried to get the body over the wall. How do we know that?
There was blood on the wall.
Yeah, so he'd been trying to push the body over the wall, didn't succeed, abandons Jo's body in the snow. The snow's coming down at this time, like I said. I was probably driving by sometime around this time, like I said as well. Not directly past where he was depositing the body, but just off. And gets back in his car, goes on home. Alibi established. But luckily, as I say, he didn't manage to hide the body. Otherwise, I believe it would still be unsolved. So, we have a couple of mysteries. We had Jo's sock. They said at the time, was it a trophy? Was it the murder weapon? I've already said why I think that was discarded. The other mystery, Jo bought that manky-looking pizza from Waitrose. The pizza and its box was never found, although the receipt was in her pocket, the coat pocket. Why do you think the pizza was hidden?
I think Master Tabak was hungry and he ate it. Have you any pizza, Master? I'm hungry now.
I don't. I ate the last one yesterday. I don't think that's the reason. What I believe is this. Jo's got home. She started sipping the cider. She's put her pizza in the oven when Tabak knocks on the door, attacks her, kills her. Now, if he leaves the oven on, well, for one thing, he might set the place on fire, although I doubt it. But there's going to be a massively burnt pizza there, and people are going to smell burning pizza, maybe. He can't leave the oven on. Turns the oven off, presumably. Should he leave the pizza behind in the box? Why might that be a problem?
It would indicate Jo had definitely vamoosed the Friday night. He was hoping people would just think Jo had wandered off and fallen in the river or something, or jumped off the bridge or something.
It would indicate definite foul play, wouldn't it? If she's got back with a pizza, she's put the pizza on, it's not been eaten, the box is there though, it would give a very definite time for her disappearance, whereas by taking away the pizza and the box, it sort of adds a bit of mystery. Could it be that Jo was going out to meet someone, a mystery person with her pizza? It reduces that sort of narrow time bracket of when she might have vanished, and it adds a bit more mystery to it. And I believe that's probably why Vincent Tabak took the pizza and, again, discarded it maybe wherever he put the sock. It was never found, even though they sifted through a ton of rubbish. So that is the other mystery. So, villains in the story, police wrongfully arresting Chris Jefferies. That was outrageous, and really Tabak should have been arrested as well. He had no alibi and had been behaving very suspiciously, whereas Chris Jefferies hadn't. But Tabak did try and misdirect the police, so I suppose, we shouldn't be too hard on them. The jury, absolute buffoons, 2 of them saying, we strangled Jo by accident, it wasn't murder. Absolute idiots. And we have the mysteries, the pizza and the sock. So that is Benjo's true crime. Bit long, bit waffly. But anyway, hopefully it gave you 37.5 minutes of entertainment, girls.
Thank you, Master. Can you tell us another one?
No, I'm off to bed now.
Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master.